Again, let's continue. We ended our discussion with the z-test, this one, for one sample mean, wherein you will have one group of sample and then you are going to compare it to the population mean. However, there are also instances that we will have two sample mean, which means we have two independent groups, but take note that they are taken from one population only. Okay, from a normal population. So again, we have two groups here, two independent groups. When you say independent, they are different respondents, but they are grouped into two groups, and then the answers of one group is not really associated with the answers of the second group, but we are comparing the two, and again the two groups are drawn from a normal or the same population. And just like the z-test for one sample mean, this is used also for more than 30 samples for every group. Okay, take note, for every group we should have 30 samples here. And this is also a parametric test, which means that we have to satisfy first assumptions before we can really use the z-test. So what are those assumptions again? First is like the data, the set of data should be normally distributed. So we have discussed that last time. Now, when you say normally distributed, if you're going to make a graph, you will have a bell-shaped graph wherein the left side and the right side of the graph, if you're going to divide it into two, will be a mirror image. Okay, and you will have you will have a symmetrical graph, or you will have the mean, median, mode at exactly at the center of the distribution. Okay, now this one is a different formula since this is two sample mean. So please take note of the formula. Z is equal to x1 minus x2 divided by square root of s1 squared divided by n1 plus s2 squared divided by n2. So ano yung nire-represent of the symbols here in the formula? X1 is for the mean of the sample 1. So you have to get first the mean of the first group, and then you will also have to get the mean of the second group. That's the x2. Now, divided by, take note, square root lahat sila nasa loob ng square root. Okay, now yung S1 there is the variance of sample 1. Plus, take note that when you say variance, I don't know, I think tatapos na natin ito. This is under measures of variation. When you say variance class, this is computed as the square of the standard deviation. So for example, kaya kasi siya may square dyan kasi most of the time the given is standard deviation. Okay, so S1 squared is the variance of the sample. Pag variance talaga ang given class, you don't need to get the square actually here. So automatic itong variance ng group 1, variance ng group 2. You're going to have the square class. You have to get the square if the given is standard deviation. So kaya naka-S siya dyan. Again, if the given is standard deviation, you have to get the square kasi originally our formula for variance is square of the standard deviation. So I hope nasundan yon. And then the N there is for the sample size, kung ilan lahat yung respondents ng bawat grupo. So syempre yung 1 and 2 represents the group 1 and the group 2. Okay, so please be familiar with our formula for the z-test. And we are going to use the same table as that of the one sample z-test. We still have here the one-tailed and the two-tailed. I hope you can still remember when are we going to use this. When you say one-tailed, if you have a hypothesis that is directional, so like you have terms for comparison like greater than, less than, more than, and so on. And you're going to use the one-tailed test. But if your hypothesis is non-directional, like we are not favoring one group over the other, we are going to use the two-tailed test, okay? And then this is the level of significance here, 0.01 if we are very strict with our limit for error. So we are just giving 1% for error if we are going to use the 0.01 level of significance. But most of the time, we are using the 0.05, especially for descriptive survey research. But there are also experimental research that uses 0.05 as the level of significance. So you have to identify that first before giving a conclusion. Kasi for the conclusion, we need to identify the critical value. So itong mga number dito, ito yung tinatawag na critical values. Ginagamit natin sila to either accept, they are standards of rejecting or accepting our null hypothesis. So take note that it can be positive or negative. So the sign doesn't matter. We just have to look at the numbers there. Okay, so we also have the same decision rule. Okay, so this is our decision rule. If the computed z value is greater than the critical value in the table, you have to reject the null hypothesis. Otherwise, you have to accept it. Meaning, if mas malaki si tabular z than the computed z, that's the time you have to accept the null hypothesis. Okay, take note of that. That's the same decision rule with that of the one sample z test. Okay, so let's have an example para alam nyo how are we going to compute for this. And syempre, the most important thing is after the computation, kailangan meron tayong decision or conclusion. So we have this, a guidance and testing department administered to incoming freshmen in the College of Arts and Sciences. Am I finished with this already? Hindi ako kahinamdam. But anyway, let's just have a review. I'll just give you another example na lang. Wait. Kaya human ako I'll just give you another set of example na lang. Kaya human na. Correlation events. Just look at it. This one. Share to share. And then you try to solve this. Para sa participation niyo sa class this morning. Using the formula, ha? Okay, let's have this one. We have here a researcher wants to determine whether or not a given drug has any effect on the scores of human subjects performing a task of ESP sensitivity. So he randomly assigns his subject to one of two groups. You have here 900 subjects in group 1, which is the experimental group, receive an oral administration of the drug prior to testing. In contrast, 1,000 subjects in group 2 or the control group receive a placebo. For the drug group, the mean score on the ESP test was 9.78. The standard deviation is 405, and as stated a while ago, the sample size is 900. For the non-drug group, the mean is 15.10. The standard deviation is 4.28, and then again, the sample size is 1,000. So you have to do this one in your any sheet of paper, and then I'll just randomly ask you later kung sino yung i-ask ko to first give me the problem and then hypothesis. So I want you to make both alternative and null hypothesis. And then level of significance, let's just use 0.05, though this one is an experimental research. But let's just use again 0.05. And then under the statistics will be the computation. So I'll just get the z-score later. And also the decision rule para hindi nyo talaga makalimutan. And then the most important thing is the conclusion. So ibalik ko. You have here again, yung researcher wants to know yung effect ng drug. So meron siyang drug here that would affect supposedly the human subjects performing a task of ESP sensitivity, kung magkakaroon ba ng mataas or mababa na score for the sensitivity test. So again, the group 1 will receive the drug, and then the group 2 will have the placebo. So yung placebo class, it's any substance given to a person, pero wala siya talagang effect. Hindi lang alam ng person na wala siyang effect. Okay. Sige, you try, and then later on again, I will be randomly asking students here to give me answers. Balaan dyan ni karon ang walay answer. Okay, sige, you may start. Asa na akong gipang tawag? Isa pa lang ang nag-send. Wala to sila absent? Charot. Sure na? Si, ano pa? Marie Badok. Huwag na akong tugain na nag-attendance ko. While waiting, let me check. A researcher wants to determine whether the drug has any effect on the scores of the population performing the task of ESP sensitivity. Okay. Does the given drugs has any effect on the scores of human subjects performing a task of that should be ESP sensitivity na bilin lang ang P. The effective. Okay. Sige. So, ano ang share ko? Share ako mong good linggi. Ulit ang attendance din. Hindi mo ito mag-absent, ha? Wala ko ilaing ka-recordan sa inyong ano. Okay, ito na. The effect of drug in the scores of human subject performing a task of ESP sensitivity. Okay. Actually, tama naman lahat ng inyong answer. When you say problem, the problem here is the researcher really wants to know or to determine whether a given drug has any effect on the scores of human subjects performing a task of ESP sensitivity. So yung first line dyan actually is our problem. So again, anyway, tama naman yung inyong answers. Ano lang yun, nag-matter lang on how you state it. Nevertheless, parehas pa rin naman yung meaning. Lahi-lahi lang mo gigamit na word. So that's okay. I have no problem with that. Okay? Sige. So how about the hypothesis? Give me first the alternative hypothesis. Marijo, Babas, and Mariel, Agustin. Glizel also, Kanyada. Kindly send your alternative hypothesis in the chat box. Tapos, yung null hypothesis. IC. Vallescas. Hannah. Hannah Regalado. And then Zuen. Kindly send sa chat box the null hypothesis. I'll be waiting for that. Again, our problem here is the researcher wanted to know or to determine whether the drug has an effect on the scores of the human subjects performing the ESP sensitivity test. Yung ESP test, that's like extrasensory perception. Kanagong murag like si Nostradamus nang na siya yung mga extra senses like predicting what will happen to the future or kanang mga paranormal activities na siyang mga gina-measure sa ESP sensitivity testing. So, muna siya ang goal sa drug. I mean, goal sa researcher kung meron bang effect on the sensitivity ng person yung drug. Nakabigay na lahat. Sino pang hindi nakapagbigay ng answer sa lahat ng tinawag ko? HA Agustin. Did I call yun na? Or naghatag lang kag-answer? It's okay to share your answer, no problem. Let's see. Nakaka-take note ko sa nag-send. Nasa waiting room? Wala ako kakita sa iyo masulog. Sige. Let's check. Well, let me see the alternative hypothesis. Ay, sagol-sagol na din. Sige, I'll just read na lang. There is a significant difference between the scores on the ESP test of the experimental group and control group. Di po ako sure. Alam namin nga na. Okay. The given drug has a significant effect on the scores of the human task on ESP sensitivity. There is a difference between the effects of the drug group and non-drug group on the test of ESP sensitivity. There is no difference between the effects of the drug group and the non-drug group on the test of ESP sensitivity. The drug has no significant effect. The given drug has no significant effect on the scores of the human task. Question mark. Question mark lang yung ending yan. Na-disconnect. Okay. Sige. Let's see. Class, when you're going to make the hypothesis, remember this one is a z-test. And for the z-test, ginagamit natin siya to determine whether there is a significant difference between two groups. Okay? So this is for comparison. So you have to make sure that in your hypothesis, you are going to state what are those two groups na kinukuhanan natin ng difference. So, most probably, the correct hypothesis here, I'll just type ha. There is, for the alternative, there is a significant difference. Difference na kasi nagko-compare tayo between the scores of human subjects performing a task of ESP sensitivity in the experimental and what's the other one? control group. Pwedeng ganito, pero pwede din namang ibang pagka-state as long as I can see the group 1 and the group 2. Na ito yung hinahanapan natin ng difference. Kasi pag sinabi nyo lang na there is a significant effect, ano yun? Hindi ko siya ma-state. Like pag sinabi niyo lang, the given drug has effects on the scores of human subjects, nawala kasi yung difference doon. So do not forget that na we are comparing here. So saan nyo na i-compare yung drugs nyo kung ilagay nyo lang na the given drug has effects on the scores of human subjects. Kasi kung iisipin nyo class, when you are going to make a conclusion, remember z-test, z-score class is for comparison. So paano ka makakakuha ng conclusion ngayon na the given drug has effect on the scores? Paano natin siya makukuha using the z-test? So kailangan compare muna natin. So after comparing, maggagawa tayo ng conclusion later. Yeah, okay lang if nasa huli yung two groups. Okay lang din. Depende kasi sa arrangement ng ginawa niyo sa sentence. As long as it is clear in the sentence that we are looking for the difference between the scores doon sa test ng dalawang grupo. You may even use group 1 and group 2. Okay? Ang ito sa akin lang, I used experimental and control group para mas klaro siya. Hindi ako malito later sino yung group 1, sino yung group 2. Nevertheless, that's experimental. The one that was the group that was given with the drug, and then ang control group with the placebo. Applicable lang po yan siya sa test na may two groups, ma'am, or kasali po doon sa isang group lang. So, sana siya. Itong sa z-test for one sample. This is also applicable for the z-test, one sample z-test. Ang kaibahan lang kasi ng one sample z-test is, actually you still have two groups there. The first one is the sample group. Pero yung isang grupo kasi is the whole population. So you are still getting the difference between the sample na score or mean with that of the population. Ito lang kasi hindi kasi population yung ating kino-compare. Instead, it's another group but taken from a normal population. Pwede din kung drug group and non-drug group. It's okay. Okay? Kasi dito sa baba, ang ginamit kasi drug group and non-drug group. So, okay lang. As long as I can see the two groups in your hypothesis. Okay? It doesn't matter whether you use group 1, group 2, experimental or control, or drug or non-drug group. So hindi naman tayo very strict with this na kailangan yung how I formulated the sentence ganun din sa inyo. No. Kaya matagal ako mag-check nito kasi binabasa ko yan siya lahat. Okay? I just want to see the variables there that you are comparing in your hypothesis. Okay? Okay, so again, our alternative hypothesis here is there is a significant difference between the scores of human subjects performing a task of ESP sensitivity in the experimental and control group. Okay? Pwede din drug group or non-drug group. Therefore, yung ating null hypothesis here, i-copy na ko na siya ha. And I will just place no. There is no significant difference between the scores of human subjects performing a task of ESP sensitivity, that should be test, no, in the experimental and control group. Okay, so that is our these are our alternative and null hypothesis. Yung effect ng drug, kasi our problem, di ba, is this one. The researcher wants to determine whether may effect ba yung drug or wala. Later class, sa conclusion, we can still answer this even if hindi ganyan din yung pagka-state ng hypothesis. Okay? Now, level of significance. What was that again? Efonda? Ano nga yung sabi ko kanina for the level of significance? Gazelle is not around. I think I called her a while ago. Pero I think she's not around. Efonda and Leslie. Ano nga sabi ko kanina sa level of significance? This Zuen is not around also. Siya nakita nag-send ng answer. Saan naman si Fonda? Okay. Wala na maghabol if Fonda. If Fonda is not around, no? Okay. Sige. So I told you a while ago that we are going to use 0.05. That's our level of significance. So we will allow at least 5% room for error. So we are like confident for the remaining 95% that we got the correct result. Okay? Now let's have the statistics. Sige, anybody can share your answer sa chat box for your Z-score. Later na yung two-tailed, doon na tayo sa decision rule mag-two-tailed. Again, everyone can share their answers. Sige, wala na. I-record sana ko isa-isa before ko answer. So, nato siya sa screen. Whether tama or mali yung answer, okay lang. I'll record this. Wait. Wala na. Save set. Okay. Sige, let me write our formula sa screen. But our formula for the z-score here is x1 minus x2 divided by square root of the s1 squared divided by the n1 plus, let me check. Sige, mali ako. Sulat. Okay. Yes, na po. Ay, na-erase na po kung disulat. Ulit. Okay, again, z is equal to x1 minus x2 divided by square root of the square of s1 divided by n1 plus s2 squared divided by n2. Okay, now, taas ko siya ha kasi I need. Ayan, the data. So, ano yung mga data natin here? X1 is 9.78. This is X1. This is for the group 1. And then X2 is this one. This is the X2. The mean is 15.10. Now, the S1 is the standard deviation of the first group. So, this is the S1 here. And this is the N1. Label ko na lang siya ha. And then this is the S2. And this is the N2. 1,000 siya. So, X1 is 9.78 minus the X2, 15.10. Divided by the square root, the S1 is 4.05. Remember that the given is standard deviation, so you need to get the square of this first. Kasi hindi siya variance, standard deviation siya, so kailangan nating mag-square. Pag variance yan, class, hindi na tayo mag-square ha. Ito standard deviation, so mag-square tayo. And then the N1 is 900 plus the N2, the S2 is 4.28. This should be squared also. And the N is 1,000. Okay, I need more space. So, tayo dito sa baba. And then let's do the math. Okay. Sige. So let us continue. 9.78 minus 15.10 is negative 5.32 divided by square root of 4.05 squared is 16.425 divided by 900. Step by step ko ito ha. 4.28 squared is 18.3184 divided by 1,000. Dito ako mag-continue. So, negative 5.32 divided by square root of 16.4025 divided by 900 is 0.018225 plus 18.3184 divided by 1,000 is 0.018384. Let's continue. Negative 5.32 divided by the square root of, let's add this one, 18225. Okay. This is 0.0365434. Okay? Sige. And then, negative 5.32. Let's get the square of this one. This is 0.191163281. And lastly, our z-score here is, wait lang, negative 27.83. Okay? So this one is our correct answer. Negative 27.83. Do not forget the negative ha, because I'm talking about the z-score. We will get rid of the negative later when we are going to make the conclusion. Pero ang correct answer dyan, negative 27.83 talaga. Okay? Again, do not forget. Huwag niyo muna tanggalin yung negative. Later na. Kasi ito talaga yung correct answer, negative 27.83. Yung iba na hindi 27.83 or negative 27.83, I think you rounded off during the process. That is why iba yung inyong decimal. Decimal lang naman. So no problem. Questions about the computation or clarifications? May gusto kayong i-clarify? Okay, hindi naman talaga masyadong mahaba yung, hindi siya mahirap. It's just that mahaba siya. You need a lot of patience here, and you have to be very careful kasi the tendency ng students kapag ka nagsosolve, nagiging careless, may mga nakakaligtaan sa process, may nami-miss. Sometimes you tend to forget na kunin yung square root of something. Ayun. Paano malalaman kung SD yung binigay or variance? Actually, this that is stated in the problem always. So just like this, for the group, the mean score on the ESP test was 9.78. SD means standard deviation. Okay? So again, it's stated always in the problem. Kasi there are problems na ang binibigay variance. Ilalagay talaga dyan that the variance, for example, is 4.05. So this time, it's SD. Okay, that's how you know kung SD. Basta ha, pag variance ang binigay, no need to get the square. Pero this time, since this is standard deviation, square nyo muna. Okay, no questions na? Again, our Z here is negative 27.83. That's the Z. Okay. Symbol ng variance, B. It's B. It's V. Capital letter V. Okay. Sige. So how about our decision rule? Sino yung hindi ko nakita sumagot? Sandra, Giselle, Kyla, Areno, Levy, Glazel, you can send your answers sa chat. Quizon, Precious, Duyo, Mark, Estrada, Ryan, Zuen, Joem, Juliana, Joel, Marcos. Naka-record na diri ha. Wala ko kakita nag-answer. Pero kung naka-answer mo niya, nakaligtaan ako, just tell me para mag-backread ko. Oyaw, Jasper, Efonda, Christine, Roda, Ross, Sales, Alexis, Solis, and Samira Biguas. Yung sa ano muna, decision rule. Ano ba decision rule natin dito? Rule ha, I'm talking about the rule. Not yet the decision. Later na yung decision sa ano, sa conclusion na yun. Hindi ko nakita, sumagot. You can send your answer sa chat box para may record ako. Wala na? Wala magpahabol? Absent na itong uban na wala ko answer. Nahaman yun sila lupalop sa world na abot. Natug na siguro nagbalik ay. So pag variance po ma'am sa formula. Oo. Kapag ka-variance ang binigay, instead of S1 squared and S2 squared, just write V. Okay? And no need to square it. Sige, sana yun. What is our decision rule here? Our decision rule is if the computed Z, ganito, ganyan lang ha para shortcut. If the computed Z is greater than the tabular Z, ganyanin ko na lang siya. Reject the null hypothesis. You can actually write this one. Ganito lang. Kung baliktad naman, you have to accept. So again, if the computed Z is greater than the tabular Z, reject the null hypothesis. Now you can write here for comparison, our computed Z again is negative 27.83. What is our tabular Z? What should be our tabular Z here? Lagay natin, one-tailed ba to or two-tailed? This should be two-tailed, right? Two-tailed. Okay, and two-tailed, let me share and go back to my PowerPoint. Again, our level of significance is this one, 0.05. And since our null hypothesis has no direction, so two-tailed test tayo, and that is 1.96 plus or minus 1.96. So our tabular value here is plus or minus 1.96 since this is a two-tailed test. Okay? Strada. Okay, sige. Unstable ang connection. Okay, okay. So again, ito yung ating decision rule. Now, what will be our conclusion? Are we going to accept or reject the null hypothesis? Given this one, that the computed Z is 27.83, the tabular Z is 1.96. Syempre, the computed Z is as in greater, masyadong malayo, than the Z test. So, therefore, reject the null hypothesis. There is significant difference between the ano yan? Score, no? Kapihin ko na nga lang. Saan na yun? Difference between the scores ay, napil akong copy ang that. Okay. Reject the null hypothesis, and yes, we have to accept the alternative hypothesis since the computed Z is greater than the tabular Z. So again, reject the null hypothesis. There is a significant difference between the scores of human subjects performing a task of BSP sensitivity in the experimental and control group. And then actually, we can have an assumption here na meron talagang effect yung drug doon sa score. So makikita pa rin ng researcher kasi 'di ba yung kanyang goal is to determine whether the drug has an effect or walang effect. But since merong difference talaga yung score ni experimental and ni control group, we can assume here that the drug has an effect in the scores of human subjects performing a task of ESP sensitivity. So, meron siyang effect. Kasi remember, di ba, pag sinabing placebo, wala kasi dapat yun siya supposedly na effect. So, mag-expect tayo na the scores, for example, should be low. Ayan. And then, iba yung scores ng drug. So, pag magkakaroon sila ng significant effect, ay significant difference, malayo yung kanilang agwat in terms of the score. So, makaka-assume talaga tayo na merong activity yung drug. So, you can write your conclusion as like this one. Aside from stating that you are going to reject the null hypothesis, ano yung next? Ano yung next niyan? Pag na-reject mo yung null hypothesis, merong significant difference between the scores, and then again, we can assume that the drug has really an effect on that certain test. Okay? Any questions so far about this activity? Oh, nag-brown out. Meron bang gustong i-clarify regarding this? Okay. Yun lang i-complicate, ha? Do not overthink. Okay? Sige.